She looked me straight in the eye and told me I was too weak, too soft, compared to her ex. And I didn't speak. Not because I agreed, not because I didn't care, but because something inside me, something already fragile and quietly worn thin, finally gave out. Was one of those moments where silence roars louder than any rage, where you feel the breath leave your body and all you can do is stand there, stunned by the simplicity of the blow. We had just come back from her cousin's wedding. Was still in the stiff button-up shirt she'd picked out for me, the one I hated, but wore anyway because she liked it. Tie was bald, lead in my pocket, and my temples throbbed from hours of strange small talk and laughter I faked for the sake of appearances. She was still wearing her bridesmaid dress, swirling the last of her wine when the words fell from her lips like they'd been waiting all night to escape. You're just too soft. I need someone stronger. Like Sebastian. Paused, phone still in my hand. Photos of the evening glowing on the screen. It wasn't a name that froze me. It wasn't the first time she brought him up, but it was the way she said it. Calm, conclusive, like a judge pronouncing a verdict after weighing evidence for far too long. And suddenly, there I was, reduced to measuring stick and found lacking. Sebastian knew what he wanted. She went on. He wasn't afraid to say no to me. He didn't get anxious around strangers. He took charge. He wasn't so fragile. I looked at her, not with anger, not even confusion, just a quiet numbness, because for the first time it didn't sound like she was comparing. It sounded like she had already chosen, and I didn't fight it. Didn't defend myself. I didn't list the moments that prove her wrong. Oh, I stayed up with her through panic. How I forgave a night she came home distant and smelling faintly of someone else's cologne. How I picked her up crying from that same ex's betrayal in a cold parking lot 3 years ago. Didn't remind her how I loved her when she hated herself. How I bent in every direction to support her dreams. Even when they didn't include me, I just sat there quietly crumbling, staring at a woman who had finally stopped pretending I was enough. Some people think breakups come with shouting, slammed doors, thrown glasses, but sometimes they begin with a sentence so casual it splits you in two. That night she fell asleep quickly, snoring softly beside me, like the weight of her words hadn't even registered. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while the echo of her voice spun endlessly through my mind. Too weak. What did that mean, really? I didn't yell when I was angry. I didn't demand control or stomp my will into the ground to prove a point. I listened more than I talked, forgave when it was hard, and chose peace over pride. That I loved her without needing to dominate her. Was I weak for staying after she flirted with that coworker and laughed it off as harmless? Was I weak for laughing along when she made jokes in front of her friends, belittling me under the guise of humor? Thought strength was kindness. Thought patience mattered. Thought love meant allowing someone to be fully themselves. But maybe not in her world. The next morning I made her coffee just like always. 2 sugars, almond milk, no spoon, because she preferred to stir it with a handle. She took it, kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, and went about her day as if nothing had changed. And I smiled, but it wasn't real. Something had shifted in me between her words and that first sip of coffee. Not a scream, not a decision forged in fury, just a quiet, irreversible break. I was done, not with her love, with the illusion of it. Over the next few days I saw her with new, not the rose-tinted lens of who I hoped she'd be, but the unflinching truth of who she was. The way she scrolled through her phone during dinner, the eye rolls when I spoke of things I cared about, the way her laughter came easier around other men than it did around me. And I realized this was never about Sebastian. It was never even about me. It was about her definition of love. To her, love meant control, power, the upper hand, the thrill of being pursued by someone willing to chase her chaos and call it devotion. She didn't want a partner, wanted a conqueror, and I was never built for conquest. I wasn't interested in subduing or performing masculinity like a weapon. I wanted to grow beside someone, not battle them for ground. Because I wouldn't play the game, I had become invisible. The final moment came without warning. It was a Wednesday. She was on the couch, legs crossed, wine in hand, scrolling through Instagram, her laughter echoing softly at something she wouldn't share. Walked in carrying a small suitcase. Nothing dramatic, just enough to leave quietly. She didn't even look up at first. Going somewhere. He nodded. Away for good. Now she looked up, blinking. What? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't explain. I just stood there calm for the first time in a long while. You said I was too weak. I believed you, I said, voice low and steady. But not for the reasons you think. I was weak because I stayed. 'Cause I kept hoping you'd see me. Because I kept shrinking myself so you could feel taller. She gave a short, awkward laugh. Seriously, I was never weak, I said. But I became weak with you. She stood annoyed. You're being ridiculous. No, I said quietly. I'm just late. She followed me to the door, arms crossed, voice sharper. We're overreacting. I didn't mean it like you meant exactly like that, I replied. And even if you didn't, what you really meant is even worse. Oh, you're running away. No, I said as I reached for the handle. I'm finally walking away. She didn't yell. Didn't cry. She stood there stunned, watching me go. 'Cause people like her never expect the quiet ones to leave. They assume we'll always stay, always absorb, always endure. But when we leave, we don't come back. We stay with an old friend for a while. Granted, a small place just outside the city. Quiet, peaceful. I started reading. Again, cooking, letting silence feel like comfort instead of punishment. Slowly, I started finding the pieces of myself I'd buried to become what she wanted. The texts came at first. Few. She said things like, I didn't mean it and you're giving up too easily. As if leaving her was the easy part. As if walking away from someone you once pictured your future what didn't require setting fire to your own. Oh. Eventually she stopped trying. Moved on. Maybe I don't know. Don't. What I do know is that I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because I finally became strong enough to let go of someone who only saw my gentleness as failure. And the night she told me I wasn't enough, that was the night I started becoming everything I was always meant to be. Not for her, for me. I've never looked